Welcome to My Psychedelic Roots, a podcast of conversations with people from a broad swath of lived experience to explore their psychedelic beginnings, or roots. What led them to start using psychedelics, what those early experiences were like, and how those roots have impacted their life's unfolding. My name is Amy Bartlett, and it is my hope that these stories, generously shared by my guests, offer perspective and insight into the lived reality of psychedelic experiencing. And so, whoever, wherever, and whenever you are, welcome. I'm glad you're here. In this episode, we hear from Judith. As she likes to describe herself, Judith is a New York-born-and-bred, naturalized Canadian mother of 2 young adults. She is a technical writer and trainer, and like many folks curious about psychedelics, she's also a lifelong learner. Judith came to the psychedelic community in 2018 as she was seeking relief from overwhelming grief, depression, and anxiety. As we hear in this episode, Judith took a measured approach to her entry into the psychedelic space, and her first encounters brought experiences of forgiveness, love, and resilience. As she describes, they also taught her deep lessons about the value of patience and space, both physical and emotional, in support of her own healing and connection with others. As she talks about, she came to psychedelics for healing, but she found so much more. And the patience and space she found have had an important impact on her personal relationships as well as her relationship with herself. Our chat wends its way through her childhood in Brooklyn, and we hear how her family played a role in her eventual first psychedelic encounters, eventually taking us into her first solo and supported experiences, all of which played an important role in shaping some of the guiding values that she continues to embody in her life today. And so, let's hear more about Judith's psychedelic roots. Welcome, Judith. It's lovely to have you here.
Lovely to be here, Amy.
And so, as we jump into our conversation together, what's something that you would like people to know?
Apart from the bio, I would say I'm a person who is curious. I love to learn. I live and work in Ottawa. I've worn many hats. I've had my shares of grief and sorrow and joy as well, of course. Not of course, but yes.
Mm-hmm.
And I like to live, dance, and learn, and certainly a lot of learning in my experience with open and psychedelic.
I love that you mentioned dance. I know that dance is something that you love to do. I'm curious if that came from your childhood, and what was your relationship to dance or play or your body even as a child?
I know I was at the very least fidgety. I would run a lot. I ran a lot. I don't really have a dance background in my childhood. I had some dance classes, but I did not do them for too long. And I'd say it kind of came late to life to be a recreational dancer and to be playful in it. So yeah, it's a later life gift.
So how did you play as a child? What was your relationship to awe, to play? How did you experience yourself in the world around you?
I grew up on a street in Brooklyn with lots of kids around because families were were larger, and we kind of ran around in packs. But I was also a little bit lost in that pack, and I had some pain relating to some household stuff, and for decades I had this image of myself of being in a shroud. We've unpacked this in therapy. That shroud, I would say, in some ways, I used to feel like it disconnected me from knowing my true feelings and my pain. So it protected me from my pain, but it also disconnected me from my true feelings. And I'd say, in large part, there was a lot of looking to others for what to do, who to be, and validation. But this is not to say I didn't experience awe. I did love nature, even though growing up in Brooklyn, we still got out of the city. We still had hikes and visits to the ocean. And yeah, I would say, or even just lying on the grass and looking up at the stars. There was certainly awe and wonder there.
Did you
But,
feel safe
but,
as a
but
child?
no, I don't think I did.
You didn't feel safe as a
I
child.
don't think I did. No. And I think that it took a long time for me to, one, acknowledge that I didn't feel safe, and two, try to get to a state where I could feel safe.
Did you feel happy as a child?
No, I would say dysthymia was, yeah,
Mm.
yeah. So I was one of six kids in a busy and bustling household with a mother who couldn't cope. She's still alive. And my father was a wonderful person in some ways, but also an angry, impatient man in other ways.
Mm.
We feared him.
Mm.
When we were younger, we grew to understand him better as he,
Yeah.
yeah.
Was there a predominant religion or
Was
set
raised
of
Catholic.
values?
I was raised Catholic. And, I have a strong sense of my father having been, he died in 2016,
Mhm.
a highly ethical person.
Mhm.
And one of my favorite stories about him actually too is he defended, he's one of five, he's the eldest, so he's the older brother, right? And he was with two of his brothers and they were gay bashing. And he put them straight. My mother recounted that story. I have a brother who's homosexual also. So he put them straight. And they knew. The uncles knew Michael was gay. This was like Michael had already been out of the closet for a while. I don't know if that's really about being ethical, but principled at the very least and respectful.
So the religion was Catholicism, and that was part of your life growing up, but also that was interpreted liberally and not at the expense, perhaps, of people in the household.
I don't think we followed the fire and brimstone Catholicism. In fact, my father he received scholarships as a young person and he was schooled by the Jesuits. And I think that really changed his perspective. And my mother was also raised Catholic. My parents left the Holy Innocents Fire and Brimstone Parish and took us to Newman Center. Do you know what Newman Center is?
No, I don't.
It's named after Cardinal John Newman, and it's a campus ministry. So who are you going to find there? But your more liberal Catholics. I mean, I shouldn't say that as a matter of course, but that's what we found. We found the more lefty leaning, liberal, loving New Testament Catholics. Yeah.
Did you grow up in an environment where psychedelics were ever discussed, either positively or negatively?
Well, I was trying to remember if they ever really came up at the dinner table. We always had a Sunday dinner. Otherwise, it was not really family dinners. And I don't think they did come up as a serious topic of conversation, at least when we were young kids being raised. I grew up in the 70s. As you know, Nixon signed the Controlled Substance Act in 1970, right? And I have these images. I still have recollections of certain images on television from fictional, popular media. Oh, he took LSD and he's on the roof now and he's gonna die. He's gonna fly. Stay away from dangerous this. And that was that was sort of a common theme or trope,
Mhm.
and it's very superficial exposure, but negative. And when my I have two brothers. I have three brothers. Two are older. When one of my older brothers had a breakdown of sorts. Somebody in the we don't really I don't have this as firsthand, so this is our part of the difficult family stuff. That brother quite possibly had a bad mushroom trip, but it was also, I think, on lithium at the time. So that was kind of rumored but not confirmed, but not a positive
Mhm.
presentation of what a psychedelic experience could be. And then, so yeah, in my earlier life, no, I didn't come away from all that thinking, oh no, they're evil. I just didn't go there or didn't have an opportunity. I was also pretty much a goody two shoes. Like I tried pot with my elder sister, like, oh no, did I do that? And did not engage in many substances. When I went to university, yes, I drank, but yeah,
Mhm.
so not too much. I mean, I have other people in my sphere now who, oh yeah, when I was in university, they partook recreationally of psychedelics. And some of the people I know through open, have had that past experience and then put it behind them, and then fast forward a couple of decades, here they are benefiting from the medicines in other ways.
Mhm.
Not so recreationally, not so crazy party. I didn't have that crazy party phase. I've definitely come to psychedelics later in life.
So it sounds like growing up felt a little bit you felt a little bit lost in
I
a big
did.
family.
I did.
Mhm. And just sort
I
of not
felt
knowing your place in the world.
lost, not mentored, not I
So sounds like on a spiritual basis, you didn't necessarily feel much connection to the Catholic Church in that sort of dogmatic sense, since you folks were taking a slightly different path.
I think I did have the dutiful sense though to
Mhm.
attend church and so on for many years, but it wasn't until I was in university when, given that my background was with more open and loving and liberal Catholics, and then I went to mass when I was at university, the very conservative priest. I was like, nope, I'm not doing this. I'm not partaking. I'm not helping that institution. And then I became more aware of what the institution, the less Christian aspects of the Catholic institution. Yeah, I am certainly a lapsed Catholic. I would say spirituality did not play a large part. And in fact, I was talking about my father again. Really smart guy, as was my mother, but
Uh-huh.
my father was a more powerful presence, I would say, but ever questioning and more in the head than in the heart. So there's a little bit for me that can disconnect you from spirituality. And that was an example in my life,
Yes.
a model.
How was school for you growing up?
Oh, I was one of the Haneys.
What does that mean?
That means I did very well scholastically, but I was also a little lost there too, socially. I was not, I wasn't, it wasn't easy. I had some friends. I definitely did. And elementary school was easier, if you will, but than high school was, that's for sure. But we were known for our academic prowess, but I was not known for the one to be selected for the punch bowl team at recess. Uh, so I was always last to be chosen for a team. In other words, not chosen at all, just defaulted. So I could run. I could certainly run, but my hand-eye coordination wasn't great and so on. I'm gonna laugh. I'm gonna share this, but I'm okay with it. Like, but for example, my father taught the first four children how to play tennis. I'm the fifth child. I never got that lesson. You know, there's so many. Something must have shifted in my father's life, in his responsibilities. My mother tried to be there for all of us. She did, but I think she was depressed. He did so much more with the first four kids than he did with, and I kind of I resented that. But as I say, I also believe that, something must have shifted in his responsibilities and his. I mean, so around the time I was born, they bought a bigger house. So talk about responsibility. And my father did all the work on that house.
Mhm.
Subsequent owners have said, wow, he took care of this house.
Hmm.
It was a big old house in Brooklyn. It purchased at the time when everybody was fleeing to the suburbs. So,
Hmm.
yeah.
It sounds like your father played a large role
Mm,
in your life and in your sense of self when you were a kid.
yeah. Yeah. So it's interesting. I hear my sister Megan talk about him. They had a different connection, a good one.
Mhm.
And again, I don't know. I don't know. One theory I have is that if whatever led me to take on that shroud, it it minimized my ability to connect the way, for example, Megan did with him. And I did later in life. I did connect with him later in life. I'm grateful for that. But yeah.
And so, as we move into thinking about yourself and your relationship with psychedelics,
Mm.
was there a particular moment, conversation, or experience that sparked your interest or first made you seriously consider understanding or maybe even trying these substances?
A particular moment, it ties to the crisis of my marital breakup and so on, and the realization that my ex and I had a lot of unaddressed issues. And that complicated communication. It hindered communication. It
Mhm.
is a contributing factor to the breakdown of the marriage. It was a contributing factor to the traumatic response to the breakdown of the marriage.
How
And
long were you together for?
we met in 1995, married in 1997. I moved out in 2014. 2 and a bit years later, we signed our separation agreement. You can imagine that's a lot of negotiating.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so it was in the midst of that relationship transition that
Of course.
psychedelics came onto the scene for you.
So yeah, but I'll also add that I had been on pharmaceuticals, antidepressants for many years. I had been seeing a therapist, but scales drop from the eyes now. I feel like there could have been a lot more honest work done there, but shoulda, woulda, coulda. I suppose you could say I hit bottom, and I knew that big pharma wasn't doing it for me. I had read, what's her name? I think her name is Kelly Brogan. She was a psychiatrist who wrote a book primarily promoting gut health as a way to mental health, as a channel or whatever. And she stopped prescribing big pharma. And she cited she had a very interesting chapter she had was about how many studies were not published. You're probably aware of this, but if they're funded by federal dollars, and so this is all in the states, and if they're funded by federal dollars, Freedom of Information Act, you can get those studies and you can see, oh, that medicine isn't as great as your, published studies say it is, and so on. And so that definitely raised my awareness. It made me more skeptical. I'd been on the drugs for years. Something wasn't working. Perhaps I was relying on the drug to make things work. Overall, I'll say my experience in psychedelics and the integration of working, it has made me realize I'm way more responsible now for my well-being. I take that responsibility more than I might have 20 years ago.
Hmm.
And relying on the pill, the antidepressant pill. Yeah, didn't help. So her book, Ayet, how do you say her first name? Ayet Waldman, remember? A Very Good Day. She's a
What?
She wrote a book about microdosing, LSD. So she's married to, what's his name? Famous author. They live in California. Michael Chabon. Michael Chabon. Okay, my infamous memory is not so infamous anymore. But so she wrote the book A Very Good Day, and her story, her backstory is different. But somebody sent this to her in a mail, a vial of LSD drops for microdosing. She doesn't, maybe she probably knows who it was. She doesn't identify the person. So she did it. She did the microdosing. She didn't tell anybody because she wanted to capture their reactions to any improvement in her mood and her behavior. Her health at the time was seriously impacting her relationship with her husband and her children. This helped turn things around. At the end of the bottle, at the end of the vial, she looked into procuring more, but it would have been through a different channel. And I don't know who gifted to, and she didn't feel comfortable with the illegality and that kind of risk. And she'd actually made arrangements to meet somebody and then said, no, no, I don't know. I'm not going to do it. And she backed off. I'm pretty sure she's also a trained lawyer.
Hmm.
Yeah, she's an author. And so that book, Kelly Brogan's book, learning about Johns Hopkins studies and Imperial College, their work, I just started mining the internet. And then one other experience I had that kind of strengthening my resolve to turn to psychedelics. Really, I was looking for mental health healing first. I know I could get so much more out of these medicines and this community than that, but at the time, that's where I was. And I used to subscribe to a newsletter, actually, I still do, about theater in New York. And uh, a blurb in the newsletter about this show at Theater 80 St. Mark's. It was a one-man show. Adam Strauss, he has OCD. He monologues on his experience. The show is called The Mushroom Cure. And I just was like, I gotta go see the show. So I went and I stayed with my brother, and I took my youngest brother, and I bought tickets for him and his partner, and the three of us went. And I'll tell you what, like it was not an experience I could relate to, and yet I was really like soaking up everything he said. Like it was different paths totally. But also I shared with my brother, and I kind of felt vulnerable. We didn't have that kind of sharing relationship, but I shared with him that I was struggling and that wanted to experiment with this as a way to help me. And I had been weaning. I had been weaning. I had been weaning off of antidepressants too in preparation for this, opening the capsule, taking out a very minuscule amount of beads every day and putting it back because the other efforts or attempts to wean was so bad, so hard, so difficult. So they went dark. They went like so taking half a pill or taking one pill every other day didn't work. It destabilized me, and I couldn't. But the incremental weaning that was the trick for me. And I kind of laugh. I can still see the dish I used for counting the beads, but I did it. So that was one way of preparing myself for this. My brother Chris, he he would be someone I didn't realize had more experience with mushrooms, etc., than I had known. But he's also talks more like a Brooklynite than I do. And I got home to Ottawa. I don't remember how much. It was shortly after that trip. He called me and he said, "So, Judy, you're gonna get a package in the mail. When you get it, just go down the dining room table. Don't touch it for a couple of days. And if anybody comes to your door, you say, oh, that's just my brother Chris. He's a nut bar, something like that. Like he sent me in a in a bag that would apparently be dried Chinese mushrooms, because he even has like a cello wrap sealer or some kind of whatever that device is called. And so he opened up a bag of Chinese mushrooms, dumped them out, put in the psilocybin mushrooms, sealed it up, and then he threw in just thematically some Asian candies and a happy birthday card. And my birthday was months away. And so there I had my supply because I didn't know what to do, where to go. And that I started using to microdose. And I was able to kind of compare that to my experience to some of the descriptions that Ariette Waldman gave about, she said, like, the flowers weren't talking to me, but they looked brighter. And I think she particularly said the flowers weren't talking to me because that relates to the flowers in Alice in Wonderland talking to, Alice.
So you went down to New York
I did.
and saw this play
Yep.
with your brother, and he was curious about your curiosity, and so gave you some mushrooms.
I felt like we really don't have a tight relationship, but I felt kind of heard, respected. And he's demonstrated that in other ways too, that he sees stuff that my siblings don't see. Like he's the only one to acknowledge something that happened to me. The others are just like, I was in the room. It was my mother's 90th birthday. So very recent. And Chris said something, and it touched on that that negative part of my childhood. And my one of my sisters looked up and go, what happened? And then Chris explains it, and she just went, oh, that. And I was just like, I can't believe you dismissed that. And I totally withdrew for a little bit, and yeah. And so later that evening, like she just, because that's in the past. That happened. I just feel like, if that happened to you, you wouldn't be wanting this dismissed. So I love my sister. I do. But, relationships are complex and families are infinitely more complex.
So you felt seen by your brother.
I did. And, like he understood that it was kind of whacked, that was tolerated, that happened and that it was tolerated. Yeah. And then I also learned something that I hadn't understood was difficult for him. So it was also my turn to kind of apologize for not understanding, but I did, and he accepted that graciously. And yeah, so where am I there? So I felt heard, I felt supported.
So do you consider this microdosing experience as your first psychedelic experience, or do you have something else in mind?
Right, and I was thinking on that when reviewing your question. So I would say, technically speaking, yes, that's the first time the substance entered my body, but and it was a positive one, and it was a time where I was definitely reading the Fadiman protocol, uh, reading again the different Imperial College articles. Then there were, there were interviews, and Robin Carhart Harris, who is no longer with Imperial College, right? There was a presentation he gave. Like I was drinking in the knowledge, and also trying to be careful about what I was doing. But I think also pretty certain that's what I had to do. I was certain this was the path.
How did it feel taking those mushrooms out of the package that your brother had so carefully vacuum sealed and preparing your first microdose? Like, were you nervous? Were you excited?
I didn't know how to grind them. I didn't know how to measure them. I was like, how many grams in an eighth of a teaspoon? I was nervous and
Mhm.
and worried about, I guess taking too much and taking it the wrong way.
The art of microdosing is that it's subliminal in that you're not supposed to feel it, not supposed to experience it at all. So, when did you start to notice benefits, or did you notice benefits?
I feel like I did, but I also didn't want to like do it for too long. So I did it for about a month,
Mhm.
and I did feel some lift. So we could say that's the first. That's like the baby step. I'll give you two other firsts, if you will. One is a first on my own, and the other is a first guided. The first on my own, the lesson from that is I was not in the right set or setting. I was not in the right place in life to do this on my own. And I was definitely feeling low. It was, I took like a gram and a half. By that time, I had a little scale,
Mhm.
and I took a lot of ice cream. And I sat and watched a kind of sad South American movie, which I think doesn't help. So I did not set myself up for success. And I was in my darkened bedroom and
Did you have any intentions when you took them?
no, I didn't. I didn't. And so I really think there I was just hoping for the magic wand. Take this, I was not fully, as much as I had read, I wasn't really embracing that it doesn't do work. You have work to do.
Right. And so
Yeah.
what was that experience like, that first come up?
Uh, I guess it was a comeuppance of sorts, it was like, or just a lesson. It really was a lesson that I couldn't do it alone. And that's what I had been aware of open for a little while,
Mhm.
but I had yet to attend a meeting. So it was shortly after that I went to my first open meeting.
Like, how did you know that it wasn't the kind of experience you wanted to have or that you expected to have?
I don't know if I can put myself back in that head,
Mhm.
that person, you're never in the same river twice. I I knew it wasn't a beneficial experience. I now know not every trip is a good trip, but I knew also I'd left I was alone, right? I was alone and hoping that experience would give me some kind of lift, make me a little less depressed. And it didn't. And like I said, I was relying on the medicine to do the magic and not remembering that I had work to do. So yeah. And, I guess shortly after that in 2018, I went to my first open meeting. And a few months after that, I had my first guided MDMA experience. And that was deep.
So
And
how did you prepare differently for that?
oh, well, differently in that the people I was with two individuals, and they, we had an initial preliminary interview. They gave me material to read, and you're probably familiar with the material in terms of preparing. And I'd had to say, I really don't think there was too much emphasis placed on intention, not the same way that I would come to a journey with intention today. But it's okay. Like I don't mean it as a criticism of the two sitters. There was certainly a lot of care taken about the setting.
Tell
And
me about the setting. How was it for you? Did you feel safe?
I did feel safe. And I also felt like I was trusting people that I barely knew and wondered why I was doing that. And one might think, I don't know. I don't know if there was a desperation that was a factor. Uh, you know the individuals involved. You know they're trustworthy. All in hindsight, I now know, yes, it was certainly a place to be and feel safe. A couple of people in my life were like, why are you doing that? So I had the range of, there's a question about support or how family and friends reacted. I had the range. I imagine many people do, some very judgmental, some respectful, accepting, but still concerned for health and legal reasons. Some curious and a little bit in awe. Tell me more. Maybe I'll follow that path. Like I was a trailblazer for a couple of people, it seems. But as I say, people in my circle wondered if I was doing the right, safe thing.
Hmm. Did you wonder that too?
A very tiny bit. I think as I mentioned earlier in this conversation, that I felt pretty convinced that was, uh, I, 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 could you say I was called? Could you say it was the right time in my life? I mean, I sometimes wish I had come to this type of healing, whether it be through psychedelics or some other path 20 or 30 years earlier, but I didn't. And, trust the timing. Here I am, and there I went. And it was, I felt safe. I felt cared for. I felt, uh, oh, I'm just remembering one thing from that experience though. I had a big release and a lot of tears, flood of love and grief that I needed to shed. And I pretty sure it was a deep, deep trip. At least that's what they said. One of the sitters said that I was in deep. And I felt that too. And, it seems to me that would be the good first step for anybody entering the world in general. It seems to me to go that route because of what it releases and what, general euphoria and love. But, it was love and grief. I think what I was trying to get at to express is that I don't always allow myself to acknowledge how much something hurts. Again, it's that shroud. There's no pain. Don't acknowledge it. And yet, I'm also not a poker player, so it's on my face. There is pain. So that is perhaps why there was so much bottled up that had to be released. Yeah, yeah.
How did it feel to have two sitters in comparison to journeying solo the time before?
Well, I think that going that route made me feel safer is not the word. How did it feel? I felt good. I felt safe. I felt that I was setting myself up for success, if you will, and not really success, define success, but I just felt like it was contributing to a better setting than the sad South American movie and a bowl of ice cream in a dark bedroom. I didn't even have a playlist. I didn't have, and watching a movie, you're really not there, right? I wasn't there.
It reminds me, the way that you described your childhood and feeling kind of lost, unmoored, unseen, perhaps sometimes even uncared for. And
I know people cared. I know people cared.
of course,
Yeah.
I don't mean
But I know what you, yeah, but I didn't always feel it. I know it. I didn't always feel it.
exactly. And, the way you describe that first journey alone, it feels sometimes what we think we want and need versus what we actually want and need. So, we need space and a movie to distract and ice cream and whatever. That feels comfortable, but it's not what we actually need. And perhaps part of what you actually need or needed was to be cared for, to be witnessed.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't mean to
Okay.
put words in your mouth, but I'm just
No, no, that resonates.
curious about
Resonates. That
the
resonates.
difference.
That certainly resonates. And the feeling afterwards with platter of sliced up bananas and fruit and just presented, and I, yeah, definitely felt cared for. One thing I remember, I want to share this because there would be a pause between songs sometimes. And initially I would be like, "Oh, the music stopped. What's wrong with the headphones?" And later on, I realized that was also kind of analogous. I'm not, one thing I've learned through my psychedelic journeys is to give people space, emotional and physical space.
Mm,
Give them time. Give the song time to get to the next track. Give the people time to get to the next thought. Give that, uh, and that's for me for me, it was tied to anxiety. And I certainly believe my first half year of working with psychedelics helped reduce my anxiety and acknowledge that I could give people space.
could you give yourself more space?
That's still okay. Well, how do you define giving oneself more space? Are you talking about forgiveness? Are you talking about something else?
I guess in part, I'm thinking about patience. In part, I'm thinking about,
Mm-hmm.
spaciousness is often an act of compassion, of generosity, of abundance, of knowing that there's enough time, enough love,
Mm-hmm.
trusting that what is needed will be there when the time is right. It's that sort of
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
what I
I
think.
suppose that's still work I have to do, but that I have started on that path.
Mm,
Definitely. I'm very hard on myself. The standards are high, and sometimes those standards are too high for me. They're too high for what I expect from others, and that's
mm,
part of the work I'm doing is to just try to be less hard, more soft, more open, more forgiving, more open to life's foibles and follies and smiles, and I don't know.
mm.
Yeah. So that, I guess, the microdosing, the home alone, and then the guided trip, I would say those are, I put them kind of bundled as the first experience because they are
Your beginnings.
the beginnings. Yeah.
And so, if that bundle were a chapter in your life story,
Mhm.
what would the title of that chapter be for you? 'Cause I know you love literature and words. I'm
Yeah.
curious if
You
you
know,
have a title.
it's so funny because I was, when I read that question on the page, it was not, I was like, okay. And you didn't, it's phrased differently on your document you sent. I thought of coming home,
Mhm,
but I don't feel that now. But I
mhm,
do and I don't. But it was certainly a first step on the journey to coming to myself.
mhm.
Yeah.
That's beautiful. Was there a specific insight or vision or feeling from that first experience that has stayed with you? It sounds like that emotional purge and that feeling all the feelings that weren't necessarily accessible. But how would you phrase that?
First journey for me had a theme of love and forgiveness.
Mm,
I had an MDMA trip a few months after that, also guided. For me, that was more about resilience. And there's been a few other journeys, in the years since then where resilience has come up or empowerment or shortly before I got the job I currently have, it was a cannabis ceremony during which I had this I was not feeling great about selling myself, about applying for work. And I attribute this particular journey to a shift and to a shift to a greater confidence. I had this vision of a tower of light, and that was me. So I fast forwarded from the earlier journeys to a more recent one. But I guess what I'm trying to share is that there's growth, there's more empowerment, yeah, more self taking responsibility. I was going to say control, but I like responsibility better. Responsibility for the path that as much as I can, as much as one can control it, because you can't, as much as for what I can accept, I accept. What I can change, I'll try to change, but it's up to me, and it's up to my mindset, it's up to my actions. And I would hope that many people have that attitude in life, but we don't, and often for very sad but good reasons, valid reasons, I suppose. So yeah.
Can I ask,
Mm,
you talked about a shroud.
yeah.
Is that shroud hiding you from others? Is it hiding you from yourself? Is it protecting you? What role does that shroud play in your journeying and in your sense of self today?
Well, what those tools that we developed or as young persons in pain, what we developed as a coping mechanism one day is what hinders us the next day. So, and couple the shroud with the very in your head household, it's hard to connect with yourself. So, is the shroud still there? Yes. Is it fraying and full of holes? Yes.
Beautiful. Thank you for letting yourself be seen by others and by yourself.
Thank you, Amy.
You came to psychedelics in a very patient and measured way in a lot of ways, from microdosing to self experimentation to sort of a more intentional and supported journey.
Mhm.
I'm curious, because you've had that range of experiences and sort of coming on board, as it were, is there anything that you wish you had known before you sort of stepped onto that wedge or that platform?
I think I wish I had known to be more patient, if you will.
Oh.
Realize that in the early days, as you say, there was a measured approach. There was the intentional guided experiences, and yet there was also, and I knew about integration, but there was still this magic wand wishing for that. There was still this, what is the next medicine going to do for me? So I feel like I came to those journeys respectfully and yet still with a little bit of the candy shop mentality, the kid in the candy shop, right? A little bit of that. So, to my credit, I did buy some psychedelics that I've never touched. I bought them because I thought, well, I need to experiment. And then I was like, you know what? No, I don't think so. Not that one. I don't think I should. And so I say to my credit, but I also, it's yes, universe put the brakes on me. Something did. So I suppose what would I, if you get back to your question, trust the timing. Maybe that's it. That's a good expression to return to when I'm feeling impatient.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
I also love that you trust yourself to know what you do and don't want, what feels right and what doesn't. I love that you didn't take a medicine.
Right. Right. And like I remember I had a 5-MeO journey. I had the opportunity, so I took 2 hits on the pipe, the pen, and I had the opportunity for a third. And I still have this visual. I was on a bridge, but I didn't cross the bridge. In some ways, you could think, well, the third hit will get you over the bridge. But somehow I knew I had to stop then and there. I still think that one day I'll get back to that bridge. I hope I will. I'd like to see what's on the other side. But that's a trust the timing. question too. Or, yeah.
And that, that ever present lesson of trusting that we know what we need when we need it and not a moment before. I really trust that.
Patience.
Hmm.
Don't always have that, but one thing that's helpful about discussing this and reflecting on it is that I do remind myself of things that I want to keep top of mind. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you.
Mm. Judith, this was such a lovely chat, a lovely conversation. I learned so much about you and about your beginnings. I love how thoughtful and measured and reflective each step was. And I really appreciate you sharing them with us. And yeah, I really honor your journey
Thank you.
and honor you. Such a pleasure.
Thank you, Amy. Yeah.
Thank you.